All right, welcome back to Talk Wrestling with talkSPORT. I'm delighted to say they're ahead of AEW All In back at Wembley this year. Actually, I'm going to be able to go this year, having missed it out being in Mexico last year. But it's probably less important that I'm getting to go this year when I missed out last year, because I'm joined in the studio now by someone else who missed out last year, and it's slightly more important because he is fighting in the main event at Wembley this year. Bryan Danielson, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I couldn't be better. Honestly, absolute delight to have had you in the studio. You've been in and done talkSPORT and Virgin, and the sun been pinging around the building. I am amazed how bright you are for having flown in yesterday. Congratulations. Well done, sir.
It's actually fun. You know, you get to talk when you get to do this. You know, you think of like, okay, people are interviewing me, but the people who are interviewing me are super interesting and they have good questions. And it's not like it hasn't been like, okay, so what are you doing here at All In at Wembley Stadium? It hasn't been that. It's been like, hey, people excited, right? Well, talking to excited people about something that you love is fun.
I'm really sorry. I'm going to absolutely ruin that record of the great people you've spoken to so far. But look, what I've really enjoyed hearing is when you talk about All In and you talk about Wembley, you were nerding out about SummerSlam 92 and Brett and Bulldog. And like for me, that was like I was 8 years old when that happened, and I didn't get to go, but I remember it being such a huge thing in this country. And for a long time, we didn't get big events like that. And now we've got AEW running its second show. There's talk about Mania coming to London, and Paul Levesque's been out and had talks with them, and feels like this country's finally getting like those massive events back again.
Yeah, and I think it belongs here. These massive events belong here, right? Like, the UK fans are some of the best fans in the entire world. Like, when we come here and do shows, like when I would come here with WWE, and we do 2 European tours every year, right? Usually one in after WrestleMania, and then one in November-ish time. And the UK shows were always the highlights, right? You go to London, you go to Liverpool, you go to Cardiff, you go to all these different places, you go to Manchester, and the crowds are just rabid, and it's so much fun. You know what I mean? And so yeah, I had to watch All In, the Wembley Stadium show last year, the 80,000 people there, 80,000+ people, and you just watch it, and the fans being so rabid made me really think how did I miss this, so I'm not going to miss it this year.
Love it, absolutely love it. Yeah, obviously you go around the world, and I'm sure say that to everyone. He's in France, he says the French fans are the best. He goes to Canada, but we do appreciate it. We appreciate the love.
That's part of my repertoire. I went to Uruguay and said, Uruguay wrestling fans are the best. They're the best.
I bet they would be. South American fans of any sport are absolutely insane.
To be fair, yeah, we would do some of the South American tours with WWE, and you'd go places, and I think we did. I forget where it was. Maybe Colombia. It might have been their first WWE wrestling show. They might have some like Independence or something like that, but it was their first wrestling show, and the way that they reacted to even just a headlock, they're like, "Whoa!" It is, yeah.
Absolutely love that. Just before we kind of move on, we're going to do a little feature, and we're going to take a look back for the website on some of your big moments, as this is your retirement year from full-time wrestling. There's a couple of bits I just wanted to hit before we get to that. Firstly, for people who aren't aware of the stuff you do in AEW, the Blackpool Combat Club, and obviously working with William Regal being one of your mentors, just tell us about darts, because we were just chatting about this in the green room, and I love that you guys are buying into the darts.
Yeah. I mean, William Regal, he introduced us to the darts and the showmanship of darts, and about how there's a lot of crossover between darts and wrestling as far as like the way that they present themselves, all these different things. They do entrances, it's like if you would have told me I'd be interested in darts like 5 years ago, I'd be like, what are you talking about? How could I possibly be interested in darts, except that darts is awesome, right? And so, but I think, as we were talking about, you guys, the UK gets really interested in darts for about 2 weeks a year. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I think that's about my tolerance level for it.
This is it. We need to bring you back out for an Ali Pally. We'll get you on talkSPORT, and you can actually sit and watch it when it's 10,000 people going absolutely wild.
I want to be in the crowd. Oh. So that's the thing. That I want to be I want to be in the crowd.
You have to dress up though. You have to have a fancy dress.
I would love that. I would love that. You know, because the darts events that I've seen, like, it's very similar. The crowds are very similar to wrestling in the sense that they're wild. It seems like a fun atmosphere. And yeah, that's right up my alley.
And there's a couple of newsy bits that I'll get in trouble in. I don't hit on if I don't ask you about before we get to the thing. I don't know if you've seen this morning, if you've been on social media. Becky Lynch essentially announced her retirement via Instagram today, said she's hanging them up. 37 years old with her daughter. She's decided that that's it now. She's going to step away. Someone you know from your time in WWE, just what do you reflect on her and her career and what she's achieved as one of Ireland's own?
Yeah, it's really interesting because this is the first I've heard of it. You know,
yeah, I spent about 2 hours with Bryan this morning. I hadn't told him yet because I wanted to get a live reaction to it.
Yeah,
terrible of me.
You know, I think what she accomplished is incredible, and I applaud her for taking that step. You know, it's hard. It's hard to step away from this, right? You know, she could do this forever if she wanted to. You know what I mean? And she's good enough to. She has the connection with the audience to be able to do that, and to be able to step away when you choose to step away. And I don't know what the reasoning is. I would assume it, you know, to step away, and you know, and she's always kind of had an interest in acting and that sort of thing. So maybe to do that sort of stuff. But being on the road when you have kids is hard. So yeah, she's had an incredible career. She's an incredible talent. She did it kind of. She's one of those people very similar to me, where it wasn't like the machine was behind her right away. Right? She was able to do it just through pure like talent and just fire, and like people connected to her, right? And so yeah, that's, you know, it's always sad when somebody that's that talented and that special retires, but you also have to give them their props as far as like being able to end it when they want to end it.
There'll be a lot of people saying the same if you lose at Wembley, I'm sure, and like who had those moments. And we were talking about this actually while you were on air on talkSPORT. Weirdly, I think I was at the bookends of your forced retirement because you were here in London just before you had to step away, I think. And then I was in New Orleans when you came back. Yeah. And so, like, I think you saw how special that moment was for so many fans in that arena and how just elated they were to see you come back. So I'm sure people are going to say equally lovely things about you if this is the finale on Saturday. Yeah.
And that, you know, and that's nice.
That's it. I'm really putting you on the spot here. Come on, talk about yourself. Everyone loves doing that.
Yeah, you know, it's it's really interesting because it's a hard concept to grasp. You know what I mean? When it's you that people are talking about. You know, they talk about like fame or whatever this is. You know, and I've never quite understood it, and I've never quite grasped it. You know what I mean? As far as like, oh, people are interested in my story, right? Like, it just seems weird. You know, I'm from a small town in Aberdeen, Washington, in the United States. People all over the world have like gravitated to this, to my story, and yet to me it just feels like everything just feels like normal because this is my normal life, right? And so it's like I get just as interested like talking to you about your twins, right? And like as when people are talking to me about wrestling, I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, like, you know, that sort of thing. So yeah, it actually feels more interesting talking about other people, I think.
Well, I'll give you a little bit of an opportunity to do that then, because
okay, perfect.
What we want to do is I'm going to run through some of your career highlight matches.
Okay.
And you can give me a one-word answer on how it makes you feel when you think about it. If you've got a story about it, you can tell that story. If you want to talk about the opponent, I'm just going to leave it open to you and get your reaction as I go through these matches.
Perfect.
I'm going to start off in AEW. I'm going to start off with the MJF Iron Man match.
Oh, gosh. So what I remember about that match is being unable to lift my arm after the match. I had torn the tendons in my shoulder, and then I had a herniated disc in my lower back going into the match, and then I hurt my shoulder in the match. And then also before the match, because it was in San Francisco, my wife had brought my kids there. And they were, and so I was wrestling with my son before the thing, and he's just loving being in the ring. And I have very, very fond memories of that, just because it's the first time my son had ever like gotten in a ring with me. And he was, gosh, at that time, how old was he? 2.5, maybe? So yeah, it was really special.
Was the 2.5 minutes with your 2.5-year-old or the 60 minutes with MJF?
Oh, so I don't get tired. Like I just don't get tired.
That's mad.
Okay, I should switch. I should change that. I do get sleepy, right? I don't get tired when I wrestle, right? I never. And so it's interesting when somebody, for example, like MJF, it's the first time he had wrestled that long, right? It had also happened to me before. I had wrestled Hangman Adam Page, and he'd never done a one-on-one match that went over 30 minutes, and then we wrestled for 60 minutes on live TV in the United States. And it's always interesting to see other people's cardio when you're in those kind of matches, and I really thrive on that, on pushing, like, and especially because I'm older and they're younger, I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna push these young guys, so yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Did you have the same experience with the next match I'm going to mention, which is Will Osprey from earlier this year?
No, Will. So Will is just unbelievable, and he's done the long matches.
Mm-hmm.
So I had no doubts, and he has no doubts about his own cardio, right? He's incredible. But yeah, when I think of that, I think of the crowd reaction, and you see how good Will Osprey is, right? Like you see it when you watch him, and then you wrestle him, and he's more incredible than you think. And it's like, and when I was wrestling, I was like, oh my gosh, how is it possible? Like, because now I didn't know he was going to be that good at interviews, right? Like, he's really good at every aspect of wrestling.
What's astonishing as someone who was going to Progress shows and Rev Pro shows when Will was first coming in is that he's been that good in the ring since he was 18 years old, and it's almost sickening just how incredible he is on that side. To watch him develop on the mic, and how important it's been in Japan, like that's been the real joy for me, to see how good he's in AEW, and he's actually able to deliver these really top tier promos on top.
Yeah, and interviews, and this is one of the hardest things I think in wrestling. Interviews that feel authentic, right? Like he's a real person who comes out, and like you can see the emotion on his face, you can see when he's happy, you can see when he's down about something, right? He's a very expressive person, and that's a skill that has to be cultivated, and he's done a great job. I think he and I had spoken a little bit, and I don't mean speak, like we had DM'd a little bit on Twitter. This was years ago, right? Years and years ago. And it's just his ability to learn new skills is unbelievable. Like I think the world of him.
We're going to come back to a couple more AEW ones. And again, feel free to go quick or long, as long as you want. I'll be here with you for the next 2 hours if we want. I'm aware that there'll be some people annoyed at Wembley who are waiting to speak to you. But let's roll back a little bit. Let's go into the WWE era. SummerSlam 2013 against John Cena.
Yeah. That was... So I don't have a ton of recollections about that. You have to understand, these are just these strange moments in my life that don't seem real, right? So it's like, I wrestled John Cena in SummerSlam in the main event and beat him. What?
Yeah.
Did that happen?
That feels like that should be the career highlight. And
yeah. And wrestling John was always interesting because the fans react so vociferously with him, right? Like, both positive and negative. So there's people who love him, and there's people that they hate him, and then the way that they reacted back and forth, to that point, that was my favorite match that I'd had in WWE, right? When I got to that after I had it, so I beat John Cena, right? Hooray for me!
All us marks at home who love the indie stuff, who were Ring of Honor fans, were absolutely going wild, and it lasted 2 minutes.
Yeah. It was about 2 minutes before I got pedigreed and then beaten for the title, and so it was like, it was but it was a really cool moment in my career.
Amazing. Have you, out of interest, is John someone you still speak to? I know there's obviously the old family links there, but have you spoken to him since his decision to basically steal your gimmick and do a retirement year? He's doing the same thing next season, right?
No. So I haven't spoken with him, but you also have to understand, I hate phones. Okay. So it's like, when I have friends, but then I'm really bad at texting. And like, I also have, if you were to go to my phone right now, I have 3,800 plus unread text messages. So
God,
it's like
that made me feel dirty.
Yeah.
I think I've got 3.
Yeah. People get anxiety when they see how many unread text messages I have, but it's like, but I feel like maybe you've seen this since we've been together, because we've been together a decent amount this morning already. I probably haven't looked at my phone once.
No, it's fair.
And it's like, because when I'm with people, I like to be with people, right? But what that does is people that you're not around, when they text you, all of a sudden I might have 17 text messages, 30 text messages, and then that feels overwhelming to me. Mm-hmm. And what do I do when I get overwhelmed? I just turn it off. So I'm really bad at communicating long distances with people. I have some very, very close friends that I probably haven't texted or talked to in like 6 months.
Have you ever left anyone on red and then later gone back and gone on unread and gone, oh my God, I can't believe I left X unread, didn't reply to them?
So that happens, and sometimes I feel bad because it's like maybe somebody had sent me like a very personal message that I didn't even see. Sometimes Tony Khan, my boss, he texts me and I don't see it, right? And that's a problem, right? Right? Like, hey, you need, but sometimes you just get so, like, the one I have it on. You can make things important, right?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? You can make certain people important. I need to switch Tony to being important, because right now the only person that's important in my thing is my wife, right? And so when she texts, it always comes through and I always see it, right? But yeah, I should probably put Tony on that list.
Love that. Absolutely love that. Look, I'll do just 2 or 3 more. I'm going to skip over a few of my preferred ones. I'm not going to ask you about Zack Sabre Jr.
You got to ask me about Zack Sabre Jr.
Go on,
you
then.
have to.
Go on.
Yeah, because so I've had 2. I think I've had 4 matches with Zack Sabre Jr., but the 2 that I've had within the last year are some of my favorite matches I've ever had. The one that we had, you would think the one that I had in my hometown of Seattle, Washington, where I won, would be my favorite, but it's actually not. My favorite one I wrestled him in New Japan in February, and it was really, really cool. And it was one of those things. Are you aware of like flow states? Mm-hmm. Like, it felt like this joint flow state where it was just like, you've got this other guy. We're both known for our technical wrestling, right? And you've got this other guy who is, I hate to say it, I don't want to say it, who's probably better than me at technical wrestling. I just don't. You don't want to admit it, but you can. But you go out there and these incredible things are happening that you would never think of. You're just out there and you're just each grappling and you each have your own style and you're doing this thing, and like something happens and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, how did that happen? And like you find yourself in these weird positions, and I think the world of Zack Sabre Jr., and that was maybe one of my favorite matches in my entire career. It's hard to pick out like individual things, but like, that's one of my favorites.
I'm just going to hit on a couple of the very big WWE ones.
Okay.
WrestleMania 30, memories of that day, going back to where you really became the guy that did, and storytelling and everything else, but the proper true underdog story come good. Yeah,
it's really interesting because my perception of that day is very different from fans' perception of that day, right? Like it was a great night and memorable very memorable, but it also wasn't always memorable in a positive way. So for example, at that point, my neck was really, really bad, and I was having these shooting pains down my arm and doing that. And it's weird because memories are weird because they're tied into the things that surround them, right? And so there's this extremely positive thing of, okay, I just main evented WrestleMania. My mom got to see it. My sister got to see it. My nieces got to see it, right? And that was really cool. And then there was also Connor from who was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. He was a child who had a really bad illness. He was there, and that was like but then he passed away like 2 weeks later. My dad passed away 2 weeks later. Brie and I got married 5 days later. So it's like, okay, main event WrestleMania, this career highlight, but I'm in this extreme amount of pain, and it feels like this thing. And then, Brie and I get married. We go on our honeymoon. Feels like the best 2 weeks of my life, but I'm also not sleeping. And then my dad passes away, which feels like a huge crash. And then Connor passes away, which is also another crash. And then shortly after that, I have to have neck surgery, and then I'm stuck. Wrestling is my way to get through things sometimes, like my dad passing away, and I didn't have that, and Brie was on the road, and so I'm just sitting recovering from neck surgery, dealing with my dad's death all on my own, and it doesn't necessarily feel there's all these mixed emotions, right? So it's hard to look at it as like this super positive thing. Versus I wrestled Kofi Kingston at WrestleMania 35, right?
I was going to ask if that, or maybe even the New Orleans return, was real catharsis for you after that experience.
The return in New Orleans was great, but the one that I really, really loved was the Kofi one, and it's just because it was the crowd reactions. Kofi himself is such an incredible human being. The fact that I lost instead of won meant that Kofi had to do media the next day, and I got to sleep in. And then also my daughter was actually at that show. She doesn't remember it, but she was actually at that show. And the idea, and she was watching. Brie was holding her, and she was watching. And then so I lost. I come to the back, and the first people that I see before I even see Kofi, I see Brie and my daughter Birdie, and she just comes and gives me the biggest hug and wants me to hold her, and she's like, that was one of my favorite moments in WWE that match.
I think that's really interesting because there's this idea of wrestlers going out on their back and retiring, letting somebody else go on top or putting somebody over. I think that's really interesting that you have the even more positive memory about WrestleMania, where technically you lost in the best match of the night, the biggest match of the night, but that's for you draw all those positives from, because it was one I was lucky enough to be there for. It was entertaining as hell, but also you associate all those additional memories with it, and that's wonderful.
Well, and the build up to that was really fun. I think because I wasn't in pain, right? And that pain is perception, right? I say that a lot, but when you're not in a ton of pain, your perception of the world is so much different and so much clearer, right? I've been in a decent amount of pain. I hurt my neck in that match with Will Osprey in April, right? And I've been my neck's pretty bad, and I've been getting like these headaches and then like intermittent vertigo and stuff like that. And your ability to be present or to be positive, or the emotional content that's going on inside you is way different when you're in pain than when you're not in pain. And so it's really interesting, the perception of that for me versus like a perception from a fan. Be like, okay, what was Bryan's bigger moment, WrestleMania 30 or WrestleMania 35? And almost everybody would say WrestleMania 30. But the moment I liked more is the Kofi match,
I love that. And look, that's my favorite match I saw live, and it's one that we don't need to talk about in depth because of the kind of connotations of it now, but Survivor Series in 2018 was another match he lost, and it's like, I remember that being one of the times where you've given me the most joy in the ring, even though you end up going down in that match, and that's, it's wonderful to hear that you have similar associations.
I loved that match. One of the things that happened in that, in the thing to that, so I was wrestling Brock Lesnar, just, for that. He was afraid of hurting me. And I told him, I said, this idea of me being kind of fragile, that it was a kind of a tale that WWE had spun. And in my mind, I wasn't, right? Like, I hadn't had any major surgeries until after WrestleMania 30. Like, I went 15 years of my career without having like I had had some concussions, which are very serious, and I detached my retina, which required like a a laser eye surgery thing, but I was back wrestling 3 weeks later, which is also not smart. But but that said, he thought of me as that day when he came in, he thought of me as like fragile and somebody he doesn't want to hurt. And I told him, and I don't know if you should tell Brock Lesnar this. I said, you don't treat me like that. I'm not that. You can do whatever. You can do the same thing to me that you could do to anybody else. You know what I mean? And then yeah.
And then he did.
And then he did.
And then he really did.
And then he did. Yeah. I got some licks in there too. You know. But yeah. But that was a really fun match.
Amazing. We've gone about 10, 15 minutes longer than we were meant to. Is there anything I'm missing? Is there something that, like, if you say you're kind of retiring full time this year, you talked on air about going behind the scenes, but if, like, you're telling your kids about your career in 15 years' time, or you're speaking at an after-dinner thing, or whatever it might be, is there a story from your career that you are like, that's the nugget one, that's the one that I'm like...
So it's not a story about a specific incident. What I would tell my kids is, one, I hope they find something that they love as much as I love wrestling, because when they say it, and it's true, if you have a job that you love, you never work a day in your life, right? And sometimes this has felt like work, and especially when I've been in a lot of pain. But I would love, I don't care what it is, if my son or my daughter, they find something to do that they love as much as I love wrestling, I will be so happy for them. Right, because this has been a blessing. The other thing, but the real lesson for me, and it came when I was forced to retire in 2015, is when I came back. One of the interesting things was sometimes I would feel stress beforehand, like, oh no, this has to be good, or I put this pressure on myself. But then when I came back from retirement, after it was all taken away from me, then I got it back. Right, this incredible thing is to enjoy these moments. Like, this is a gift. And when I came back, I thought I'd be super nervous. It was WrestleMania. I hadn't wrestled in 3 years, right? I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how my body's going to hold up to any of this. And I expected to feel a little bit nervous, or like, how's the crowd going to react to me? All these different things. And what I realized is that didn't happen at all. It was just joyful. And like and even now, I'm behind the curtain, about to go out. And even before my music hits, it's usually like 2 minutes before I know I'm about to walk through the curtain, I start getting like these tingles in my body, and just excited and just happy. And like, and yeah, so it's that idea of if you get to do this thing that you love, or this thing that, you really enjoy, don't try to truly enjoy it. Like, go out there and feel it. What does this feel like? And I've tried to, I meditate after my matches. I try to do it almost immediately after my matches, so I can lock in this feeling of what wrestling feels like, because I know it's coming to an end, right? But the idea of, what does this feel like? What are the emotions that I feel? What does my body feel when I'm going through this? And it gets like, even when I'm talking about it now, I get goosebumps talking about it, because being able to lock in these feelings is like, I'm hoping, because I went through a major depression when I was forced to retire before. I'm hoping that kind of sustains me through into the next chapter of life, right? Holding on to these not necessarily memories of feel, because the memories are interesting. The memories are just these weird, these things that I don't really understand. You look back at memory and it's clouded by all these different things. But if you can kind of lock in the feeling versus the memory of what it felt like to be a wrestler, right? Like I'm hoping by locking that in, I won't miss it as much. I'm hoping, nobody knows. Who knows what's going to happen? You do this. I've been doing this my entire adult life. My last real job was at a video store / tanning salon.
What?
Right? Like, they don't even have video stores anymore. That's how long it's been since I've been wrestling, like, as a full-time wrestler. Like, yeah, I would put videos back on the shelf, and then I'd go clean a tanning bed. It was called Video Tonight, Tan Today.
Because what's most important is if you're having people around to watch a VHS is to make sure that you've got lovely glowing brown skin before you do so.
Yeah.
Unreal. Bryan, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.